Hey guys, what is up? And it's time to do a full-on integration. I haven't done any modding in a few weeks, and I'm just looking to jump right back into it and start with the full-on project. So for this mod, I'm going to be taking the strife, integrating it into the crossbolt shell. Now this is going to be sort of like a poor man's Straven, because the Raven's becoming rather difficult to find and rather expensive, because everyone sees the price go up and then they want to sell it for more. So due to that, I'm going to be trying this sort of Straven-esque mod, but with a crossbolt. I think it'll work pretty well. This pulp-up design should be relatively similar to the Straven. The only thing that's really different, in my opinion, is the stock is a bit different, and I think it's a little shorter. But we'll see how good we can make this look, and then I'm not really sure what I want to do for the front area, whether I want to put the crossbolt front back on, or if I want to stick with more strife in the front, so that I can keep that extension attachment point right in the front. But anyway, to get started, we'll open both blasters. Just a pro tip, I like to keep all my screws and small accessories in one place. I usually use these little Altoids containers just because they close, and then that way in case it falls off the workbench or something, it'll still all be in here. You could also use one of those like little plastic organizers or something of that nature, maybe even like a Ziploc bag. Just something so that you don't lose all your screws in the small pieces, so that when you go back to assemble it, you have all of them. Okay, so for mods like this, it's very important to sort of eyeball out and get a very exact idea of what you want to do, what things you want to line up with what, and where you want to start cutting. So while I'm doing that, I'm starting to make some initial marks, and then I might start very carefully cutting away. But until then, I'm just going to keep playing around with it and see exactly how I want to line up these two shells. Okay, so after a few initial cuts, this is what I'm left with. It still needs a few smaller cuts, which I'll probably do by hand with the Dremel. I made most of the big cuts on the scroll saw. It's a very useful tool if you do a lot of integrations. I highly recommend it. It's basically, you can do all the cuts with a bandsaw, but the scroll saw gives you a little more room to wiggle around with, and you can do like weird cuts and stuff, as opposed to just the straight cuts of the bandsaw. But anyway, I digress. This is pretty much how it's going to be. Still needs a few tweaks, and then it should line up fairly well. This is the only side I did so far. This was sort of the test, and then once I get it to exactly how I want it, I'm going to duplicate the cuts on the other side. The things that you do to try to get a project to cure in a straight manner, this is the second time that I'm gluing the rear section onto the strife. That's just because the first section, when it dried, it bent slightly. So it was off to the left slightly, and it wasn't really a big deal, but it kind of bothered me. So I figured before I proceed, try to get it as perfect as possible. So right now, this is just the strange configuration that I'm using to hold it in a straight manner while it cures. And then once it does that, I'll open it up and then probably go at it with another round from the inside this time. And then it should be pretty solid and won't come apart anytime soon. Okay, now as you can see here, the gaps have been filled with actually a Steam gift card, I believe. But just a thin plastic, it doesn't really matter what you use. Now the next challenge is going to be to do some bodywork sanding, and by that I mean firstly removing all of the warnings, patenting information, things telling you not to modify your blasters, things of that nature, that you don't need, obviously, because you're building a super sweet custom Nerf blaster. You don't need them telling you not to modify it. So we're going to be removing all that before painting. I usually start with a rough grit sandpaper, then work my way down to something finer, like 400 to 600 usually. Start with something low. I think I'm going to start with about 80, just really rough to get all that lettering off there. And then for the handle, that's probably going to be the biggest challenge of this particular mod, just blending these two handles together. I'm going to do that by removing all of this sort of pseudo grip material, and then going at it after with some epoxy putty and just sort of trying to form it into one continuous handle rather than the two separate pieces. So I'm going to start with sanding now. Okay, so it's been a few days since the last update, but basically I've just been sanding for several days. It really is starting to come together. I know it looks a little weird because it's so many different colors, but once you get the paint on, you could really see how smooth it is, and then it all starts to look like one homogeneous piece. It looks a little strange, like I said, because there's just so many different colors, but it's actually like super smooth and pretty much exactly where I want it. I've decided to sort of go all out with this blaster, and I think this is probably going to be my first lipo ready Nerf blasters, so I've decided to gut all of the battery tray and then gut all of this as well to give a little more space. I still need to make a new backplate just to go from here to here. And stop the battery wiring from, getting into the firing mechanism. However, it's just completely gutted and ready to go for a LiPo battery pack. Unfortunately, this blaster probably won't be finished for a while, and I'm going to, have to cut the video into two, just because I want to show this blaster off, but I also need to wait for a variety of parts to come in the mail, and I'm not expecting some of them to come until like after HvZ. Unfortunately, I can't make it to HvZ this year, hoping next year, since the location clues have been handed out. I think I can make that work. However, basically this blaster is getting there. Like I said, I'm going to wait for some parts and then do the part 2. So this is mostly like, the bodywork and whatnot, and then the second part will be wiring and then also painting. But yeah, I've just sort of fallen in love with how this blaster is turning out so far. I really, really like it a lot more than I thought I would, and I'm just decided to go all the way, pull out a lot of the stops and buy some extra parts that normally I wouldn't buy, but I want to try switching over to LiPos. So this would be a good first blaster to try it out with. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry that I have to cut it sort of in two, but it would be a really long video if I kept it in one, and I'm going to have to wait a while for those parts, like I said. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section down below.